Today we're going to learn the third way to solve systems of linear equations. This is the way of elimination. So elimination is a little different than the others, but you are solving equations. So what we need to do is write our steps for how to solve an elimination. So the first thing is line up all of your variables. So usually you're going to have your equations in standard form. That would be easiest. The second thing you're going to do is make sure or change equations so the coefficients of one variable is the opposite number. And I'll explain that in a minute. Then what you're going to do is add the equations to cancel out one variable, then solve. The last thing we're going to have is substitute your answer to find the other variable. All right, so let me go ahead and make this so you can see it all. The font is very big, but this way you guys have all of this written down and it will help a lot, I promise. So let me go ahead and try and select all. We're going to make it a little smaller. There we go. So these are all your steps. Of course, it might be a little confusing now, and that's okay because we're going to do a couple examples together. All right, so first off, let me talk about what coefficients are. Coefficients are the number in front of a variable. So if I have 5x, 5 is my variable, or is my coefficient. So if we're looking to make sure that the coefficients are opposite, we'd have a 5x and a negative 5x. That's what we're going to want, okay? Opposites. So let's go right into our first example so that we can figure it all out. Okay, so step one, it says, line up all of your variables. So in step one, I have my x's in a line right here. I have my y's and then the equal signs and then my constants or just my regular numbers. So they're all lined up. We don't have to move that around. They're also in standard form mostly. Then number two, make sure or change equations so the coefficients of one variable is the opposite number. Okay, so we're looking at our x's. So we have this x, the coefficient's really 1. It's that imaginary 1. And this is also 1. They're the same number. They're not opposites. However, look at when we have our y's. We have a positive 3 coefficient and a negative 3. So they are opposites, and that's what you want. So our next step, now that we're done with number 2, is we're going to add the equations together to cancel out the variables. So we're going to combine our like terms. The whole point of adding the equations, we're going to go up and down. When you add them, you're going to end up just combining your like terms. So I have an x plus another x, which is 2x. Then a 3y plus a negative 3y. Well, that's 0. That's nothing. So they cancel out. And then we have an equal sign. Negative 2 plus 16 is a 14. The whole point of that is to cancel out one variable. Y is now gone, and we're left with a one-step equation. So we're now going to solve it. We're still in step 3. So we have 2x equals 14. I divide both sides by 2, and I get that x equals 7. Well, that's the first part of my answer, right? So our answers are always in a coordinate, and I know that it's x comma y, so I know that my x value is 7. Now let's go into step 4. Step 4 says substitute your answer, which we got x equals 7, to find the other variable, just like in substitution. So I'm going to sub it in for one of these equations. I'll do the first one. So we have x plus 3y equals negative 2. I'm going to plug in 7 for x. I'm substituting. So we have 7 plus 3y equals negative 2. And now I'm going to solve. I subtract 7 to both sides. We have 3y equals negative 9. I divide both sides by 3. It cancels out, and I get y equals negative 3. And I put that in my answer. And that's it. That's how you do your elimination. So let's go ahead and do the second equation also together. So let's look back at our steps, okay? So the first thing says to line up your variables. So again, we have our x's already lined up, our y's, our equal sign, and our constants. That's what we want, okay? So it's already done for us. The second, make sure or change equations so the coefficients of one variable is the opposite. So in the previous example, our y coefficients were the opposite. That's what we wanted. So let's see. So for x, we have a 2x and a 4x. Well, they're not opposites because we'd either have 2 and -2 or -4 and 4. So they're not opposites, but let's look at the y's. We have a -1y and a +1y, so that means they are the opposites. So we're good there. So step 2 is done. Step 3 is, it says to add the equations to cancel out the variable. So if we're adding the equations, we do it vertically, and we're just combining like terms. So 2x plus 4x is 6x. -y plus y is 0. They cancel out, which is the purpose, equals 9 plus 21, which is 30. Now we just solve for x. We divide both sides by 6. We get x equals 5. So we know that's the beginning of our answer. It's x comma y. We have 5 comma something. All we have to do now is our very last step, which is substitute our answer in for one of the equations. Okay, so we need to figure out what y is. I'm going to sub this guy in for the first equation. So I have 2x minus y equals 9. Instead of 2 times x, it's 2 times 5 minus y equals 9. I'm left with 10 minus y equals 9, and I subtract it over. What I end up getting is -y equals a -1. And you guys should know that there is a 1 in front of y that we have to get rid of. So I'm going to divide by a -1, and I get that y equals a +1. And that is our answer.